Hey parents, I want to show you guys the system that I bring every new patient through in my office. So I'm going to teach you really how I do my initial assessment in a very simple, basic way. I'm going to explain to you why the different labs that we do, because I want you to be able to, number one, assess your child's neurological development from home. But number two, I want you to know what labs you need to request from your providers, because in some of them, they won't even know what they are, to be honest. But I'm going to explain what the labs are, and then I'm going to break them down in detail as the course progresses. But this is just a foundational overview, a 10,000 foot view of all the things that you're going to learn and why you're going to learn them. So number one is I always talk about foundations for development, because neurodevelopmental delays are simply lack of development in the central nervous system or in the brain, simply put, and there's signs of that. Number one would be what are called primitive reflexes. These are reflexes that should go away in the first year of life, and they actually present from our brainstem. They're housed in our brainstem, and what happens is when you stick your finger in their hand, they grasp down, they start firing their muscles up. These muscles then fire into the brain. The brain develops a point where it says, I know how to use my hand anymore. I don't need this reflex. That's called a palmar grasp reflex. There's many different reflexes that help us develop our movement. They help us develop our balance centers. They help us develop our eye tracking centers in complex body movements. That way we can get a really well-developed complex brain that can adapt to a lot of stuff. But it all starts with primitive reflex development. So I'm going to teach you how to assess these reflexes. And the nice thing about this is when you can assess these reflexes, now if you go in and make a change, like for example, let's say you go change their diet. Maybe you get rid of a food sensitivity, and you start seeing these reflexes change, you know you're making a change to the brain, because these are true reflexes from the brain, and all these systems are going to tell us about the brain. In the first year of life, primarily, we have primitive reflexes that develop. Then we start developing our vestibular or our balance centers. So we can assess our balance centers in really simple ways, which I'm going to teach you how to do. That's the next step of development. And there's also these reflexes called postural reflexes that come from our balance centers that I'm going to teach you how to assess also. Then on top of that, we have ocular tracking skills. The ability for us to track objects with our eyes, for us to converge our eyes, diverge our eyes, track up and down. I'm going to teach you how to test those on your kid. So number one, you'll know, do they have primitive reflexes that should have gone away in the first year of life? Is their balance centers not developed? It starts developing, right around that 12-month mark to 18-month, 2-year mark. It starts getting stronger and stronger. Are their eyes tracking appropriately and working together? These things are foundational for the brain to develop. These are all come from these lower brain areas. And what happens is as these get more and more efficient, we start getting more and more firing into our higher cortex, and our frontal lobe starts to develop. That's where all of our cognitive skills come from. So if your child's struggling with cognition, they're struggling with speech development and understanding social environments, impulse control, all of those types of things, those are from our higher cortex. But we have to develop a foundation first to develop that. So I'm going to teach you how to look at all those foundational pieces so you know, oh, my kid still has reflexes that should have gone away at 6 months of life, 8 months of life, 3 months of life. And not only that, but what to do about it. But going back, for our brain to develop efficiently, we need 3 things. Number one, we need stimulation, which is this chart, in the appropriate developmental sequence, which even a lot of you guys are probably already doing. You're probably, maybe you've been working on primitive reflexes for 2 years and you can't get rid of them. You're doing the appropriate developmental stimulation, but you're missing pieces. And that's, we don't have enough ATP or energy, or we don't have enough oxygen. We need oxygen, we need energy for our brain to make connections. And this is the biggest deficit that I see. This is why we use different therapeutic strategies like lasers and why we use oxygen in our clinic. But we can do it, if you can't afford a laser at home, that's okay. You can do it through diet, you can do it through lifestyle changes, and I'm gonna teach you guys how to do that. Also, for example, I'm gonna teach you guys what labs need to be ran, because if your child has low oxygen levels, which I'm gonna simply teach you how to look at, they might be anemic. Maybe they can't transport oxygen efficiently, and this is a basic lab that these labs together cost less than a couple $100 if you're paying out of pocket, but your primary can run all of these under your insurance. These are standard labs, making sure that they're not anemic. Another big thing is if we have too much inflammation or neural inflammation, from, let's say, for example, glucose dysregulation. Our brain's inflamed and connections can't happen. So we need to know those things. And I'm going to talk a lot about, specifically about diet and the foods they're eating, because this is the biggest reason, in my opinion, that kids aren't developing appropriately. And I'm going to break down the food industry and all that type of stuff for you guys, because it's really, really, really important that you understand this information so your kid, to be honest, can actually develop. Other things that we'll talk about is all these basic labs, kind of what they do, just in a really general sense. I'm not going to break it down super specific for you because it can get really confusing and I don't want to confuse you. But the things I like to have ran are a CBC, a CMP, which are just standard labs, glucose, A1C, insulin level, thyroid levels, and making sure your kid doesn't have celiacs. And then I like to run what's called a urinary organic acids test, which helps us understand how we're producing energy, or ATP. I like running a neural zoomer. This looks for neurological autoimmunity because, for example, when you look at the research on autism, autism is an autoimmune disorder against the brain. It's, from a diagnosis or a DSM, 4 criteria, it's a social communication disorder. But when you look at the research, it's autoimmunity. And we need to figure that out if that's what's going on and what areas of the brain are being affected. So that actually looks at 48 markers for neurological autoimmunity. We can look at their gut. A lot of kids with developmental delays have dysregulation of their gut. It's because a lot of times they have underlying infections in their gut. A lot of infections. They have yeast overgrowth or candida overgrowth. They have different bacterial overgrowth in their digestive system that can be worked on. I like to look at food sensitivities. So that way we're making sure we're not eating a food every day that's inflaming our gut. And I like to look at something called a total toxic burden. And what that looks at is heavy metal toxicities, environmental toxicities, and mold toxicities. And the reason why is because those, when you look at it from a research standpoint, have been highly associated with developmental delays. And a lot of this is coming from our food source. A lot of it's coming from our environment. And I'm going to explain and break all that down to you. So this is what you're going to get in this course is I'm going to teach you how to assess normal development. I'm going to teach you how to assess if they're getting enough oxygen and energy. And then I'm going to show you the labs that need to be ran to make sure that we're getting enough energy, we're getting enough oxygen, we don't have too much neural inflammation, and what to do from a dietary and lifestyle perspective to start improving that. Because I can't tell you how many kids have came into our office they've been working on primitive reflexes for 3 years and we change their diet. We fix work on their anemia issue, or we stabilize their blood sugar, and now their primitive reflexes go away because their brain isn't inflamed, they have enough oxygen, they have the basic resources for normal function there. Now the brain can start maturing and developing, and a lot of times it's that simple. So I want to teach you guys how to do that really effectively, really simply over this short course. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. To learn more or to schedule an intensive or anything with my team, there's a link below. Just go ahead and click that and that'll get you to the right spot. Have an awesome day.